It is January 9th and I'm here with my first update. We had a bit of a break from these monthly wrap-up reading vlogs in December because I just didn't have the time, and I like my December reading to be a bit more relaxed. But we're back at it in January and I started off the year strong. I'm somebody who puts a lot of weight into the first book of the year, more than I should, more pressure than I should, but I always want that to be a 5-star because in my mind it sets the tone for the rest of the year. So I thought the best thing to do was to reread a favorite, and I did that. Where is it? The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This was a reread, so I annotated it. One of my goals this year is that whenever I reread a book, I'm going to annotate it if I do own a physical copy. So that was a great experience. There was so much about this book that I forgot. I first read it in 2018, so that makes a lot of sense. I think what I remembered most about this was the atmosphere and the feeling and how much I loved Vasya. She is one of my favorite characters of all time. This is a Father Frost retelling. It works perfectly for the Once Upon a Readathon that I am co-hosting for Team Ice Fae, and that is our mascot, so I got some bonus points there. A lot of people are reading this trilogy right now, so talking about it with other people makes it that much more interesting. There's a lot to unpack in this one. There's a lot of setup, but I think you need all of that backstory. There's a lot of great characters to follow. One of my least favorite characters of all time is in this as well, Constantine. He is the worst. He's awful, but you're supposed to hate him, so I think she does a good job at that. It's a perfect book to read in the winter. It is. You see the snow on the cover? It is so chilling. You almost feel it in your bones. It just has some of the most beautiful writing I've ever experienced. And there's a reason that so many people put this on their favorite books of all time lists. And then I read The Girl in the Tower. This is the first time that I read this because I'm continuing on with this series. And this might be my favorite. I find it hard to rank books in series. I always think it's interesting to watch other people do that, but I struggle with it because once I finish a series, it becomes like an entire entity to me. It becomes one big long story, and I have a hard time just choosing one unless one is really terrible. But none of these are terrible. They're all fantastic. This is a 5-star all the way through series for me. But I think this one might be my favorite just because you get more character development. We are introduced to my favorite character in the entire series besides Vasya. I love Vasya so much. But you get to see her leave her small village and go to Moscow and some reunions that she has, and she learns more about herself and what she's capable of. The romance in this is not actually my favorite thing, but it's so slow burn and such a small part of the story that I don't think that even matters really. But I just like to see her growth and her fighting against social norms and others' expectations of her. And then we get to this last book, and yes, my series doesn't match. I don't know how I ended up with this UK edition of The Winter of the Witch. No floppiness. Look how floppy my US ones are. What is with the UK and these stiff paperbacks? But I do like this cover. But this was probably my least favorite, though it was still 5 stars, so that doesn't really say too much. The reason it's my least favorite is because it's more action heavy, and I am more of a character reader. I am more of somebody who likes slice of life. There were more battles in this, so I can see why this would be a favorite for people. It was just too plot focused for me, and I cried though. There were 2 moments in here that had me bawling my eyes out, so that says something. I cheered about a certain moment as well, so I think it wrapped up really beautifully. I'm hoping to do a discussion of this entire series at some point on the channel because there's a lot to unpack here, but this is the perfect way to start off the year. I've read a few more things since we last spoke. I think 3 things. One of them, it's up there, I should grab it, but I'm not gonna bother because I've talked about this book 1,000 times. I reread Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies for the 3rd time in a year because the sequel just came out actually today as I am filming this, and I started it this morning. Even though I did get my pre-order a week early, I just was waiting for the audiobook. I love to immersion read that series. The audiobooks are fantastic, so I started that this morning. It's making me so happy. What can I say about book 1 that I haven't said a million times? It is my ultimate comfort book. That's what I figured out, and it's up there with Pride and Prejudice. If you asked me that question, what is your comfort read, I'd be torn between the 2, which is kind of wild to say out loud because how can you compare those 2? But they're just my ultimate comfort reads. I think if I could only read 2 books for the rest of my life, it might be those 2. So that is really saying something, and you will hear my thoughts on the sequel soon because I have a feeling I'll probably finish that tonight or tomorrow. And then I read Time to Shine by Rachel Reed. this was my first hockey romance, and actually the hockey stuff I liked. I was surprised by that. I thought that some of the game stuff was kind of fun. It was fun to cheer these characters on. I really liked the chemistry between these two. So this is Casey and this is Landon, and Landon is called up to play as a goalie on this hockey team in Calgary. He doesn't think that he's going to be there very long because the backup goalie was injured, so that's the only reason that he is there in the first place. So Casey has him move in with him in Calgary just during this time, and they are opposites attract, that is for sure, but they have this really sweet friendship that becomes something more. My thing about this that I didn't really love is that they almost felt like caricatures rather than real characters. Casey was really endearing at first, but the way that other people treated him, and then in turn how that made him see himself, really got to me. He is one of the best players in the entire league, but he thinks he's stupid and people around him make him feel stupid, and then he talks too much, and then he's just too much overall. And it's so hard to read about, even though this is a contemporary sweet romance. I found that really difficult to read about. He was just so, he needed more self-esteem. And I think that's kind of where Landon came in to tell him, you're not stupid, and we get some development with that. But it was just over the top that it felt like he was being infantilized in some way, so it was hard for me to see him as like a romantic lead. And we hear about his sexcapades all the time, so that was a little bit much for me. And then Landon is the opposite, where he keeps more to himself. He does not talk as much. He needs his own space, and he's dealing with his own grief. So the loss of a family member is a conversation in this book. It happened before the book started, but he's very much dealing with the effects of that event still, and his relationship with his parents and stuff. I thought that was really sweet. And it's just one of those hopeful books. You hope that in real life a hockey team would be this accepting of two players dating, if you know what I'm saying. But it's also, I guess, a workplace romance, which is fun in and of itself. But yeah, it's a fun read. I read it in a day, so obviously the readability factor is there. If you're looking for something to get you at a slump, I think that this is a good one. I just wish we had more depth in terms of their characterizations. We get depth in terms of the themes and some of the conversations that are happening. I just wish that Casey in particular felt more authentic. He just felt like a caricature, and I did think he was endearing. I just thought it was too much. And then the miscommunication happens a lot, and you get so frustrated with Landon a lot of the times. But it was a fun read. My first hockey romance. I'm definitely open to trying more. And then I read an e-arc of Lura The Wilds by Annalise Brana, and this lived up to the hype for me. I've hyped this up in my head for so long because it was supposed to come out in 2023, then it got picked up, and is now coming out in February of this year. So pre-order those, get your library requests in, because it is so worth it. I really, really enjoyed this. This is fantasy romance, and as I'm learning that I do like fae, I had this idea in my head that I was not somebody who loves fae, but 2023 proved to me that I am somebody who loves fae. I'm learning that I'm more into fae that have antlers than have wings. And this book proved that to me. There's something about the antlers that just works for me. So we're following Laura, and she's a human living in a world where the humans are basically prisoners. They live in this town, and there's a spell surrounding the town that makes all the humans scared to leave. And so the fae rule this world, and they look down on humans, and the humans are just left to survive. Something happens at the beginning of the book. Then Laura is taken to this fae castle with the royalty, and she is asked to go through this enchanted library and find these different tomes and catalog everything, because fae aren't allowed in this library, but they discovered that humans are. So that is the setup of this. It is so interesting. The first half was my favorite, I will admit that, but that is true in a lot of cases, that I like the setup. The second half becomes kind of a different story, and it's more of an adventure thing, which is just not what I prefer, though I did still like it. And we get kind of a found family thing that happens in that second half, so that appealed to me. We're introduced to my favorite side character in that part, so I did appreciate that. It's also a romance, and it's sort of a love triangle, though it took me a long time to figure out. If you watch any sprints that I was hosting or on while I was reading this, I was talking about I had no idea who the other love interest is, so it takes a while to meet that person. I was so confused. I thought it was the best friend from home. I had so many theories, but you figure it out eventually. And then, yeah, you're torn. And then the ending of this book happens, and my jaw was on the floor. I need people to read this and talk to me about it. So if you read this, message me, because I need to discuss. And it's very much a first book in the series. At the end it says to be continued, and it ends on a cliffhanger, just know that. So yes, very much a first book, and I can't wait for news about the second one. We don't know anything yet, not that I have seen, but it's really great writing. There's some repetitive lines and maybe some modern language that took me out of the story a little bit, but I think it's a fairly strong debut. And yeah, one of my favorite fairy stories. I mean, I'm one of those people who, I'm a sucker for books about books. I know that some people think that's kind of fan servicey or too on the nose or whatever. It works for me. I fall for it. So I really had a good time with this. I really liked Laura as our main character. So that is it right now. Obviously I'm reading Emily Wilde #2 as we speak, so I'll have an update on that one for you pretty soon. I know the lighting is terrible, but I had to film here with my bestie. Look at her, she's my studio audience always. So I have a few books to update you on. Obviously I read the day it came out Emily Wilde's map of the Otherlands. Loved it. Is it just as good as the first? It might be. I have to read this 2 more times to know if it's just as good as the first, because I've read the first one 3 times at this point. But I ate this up. I just love Emily, and I know that the series is not for everyone, and upon reading these I can maybe see it. I don't know, I struggle with it. I think the journal tone of it might put some emotional distance for some people. Maybe they don't connect to Emily because she herself is emotionally distant, but in this one I think that she loves Bumblebee from book 1, and she still has some things that are holding her back, but she's moving forward. And I think that it was amazing that we got cameos from some characters from the first book, so people that she's still in contact with, and she makes some new friendships and some new relationships that I thought were charming and sweet. This feels more like an adventure story than the first book. They kind of have more of a mission. The first one was more slice of life with some moments of action, where this one I think their main plot that's driving it forward is a bit more action, but it's not an epic fantasy in any sense of the word. It still has that cozy vibe. It still journals. We get some really adorable moments in here as well. From the first chapter I was laughing and remembering why I love these characters so much. So if you're like me and you're such a huge fan of the first book, I can't see a world where this will disappoint you. So I think that's all you need to know. How rude of my studio audience to be ignoring me like this. But anyways, I read this arc of Lazelle Sambury. This comes out at the end of February, and you need to get your hands on a copy because I love this. I bet you the audio for this is going to be fantastic. She wrote Delicious Monsters, which is something I want to read. She's like a local author for me, which is amazing. This is very much set in Toronto. There are a lot of Toronto references and little neighborhoods, and I'm very familiar with that area, so that was kind of fun to read about. If you love family drama, you have to read this. This is the most interesting family I've ever read about. The level of intrigue in this is high. This is a YA horror, and I have discovered I love YA horror, and the thing about this is that it doesn't hold back just because it's YA. Lazelle Sambury obviously trusts her audience to be able to handle these things and not to have their hands held, and I love that about her. I think she's brilliant, and there are some really gory scenes in this actually. It opens with our main character Sunny. Her mother is killed. That happens in the prologue. And then we get to the chapter 1, and her mom has passed obviously, and it's the family reacting to that. The family's lawyer gives Sunny a post-it from her mom that just says take care of Dom. Now Dom is her youngest brother, and this family dynamic is very odd. She has many siblings, and they all have kind of left Dom out. He was never included in things. Nobody ever got close to him, and he is being charged with the murder of his girlfriend. They attend this private school that their family owns. It's a private school for children that normally wouldn't be able to afford to go to a private school. So while her family is wealthy, they do attend the school since they own it, and it would be weird if they didn't. And one day after school, she walks in on her brother, and there's a dead body, and he's covered in blood. But he swears that he's innocent, and she thinks of this post-it note, and she has to protect her brother. And we see them grow kind of a relationship. And there are also letters that her mother wrote when she was a teenager that are interwoven in this story that really add a lot of intrigue and had my head stretching. There's a lot of like WTF moments in this. The middle is kind of slow. I think it was a little too long, and I don't know that I was as invested in her high school stuff. Like, she has a boyfriend who she doesn't really like, but she won't dump because it would look bad. Sunny is very, very aware of her privilege and of wanting to be perceived as a nice person, but a lot of people are starting to feel like that is fake, and she's realizing how fake it is. And she's in this position where, yes, she has privilege being from a wealthy family, but also her family is black, and her brother, who's being charged, is a black teenager, and he's not getting a fair investigation because of that. So there's a lot of layers to this, and it goes into a place I never thought it would go. I could see why it won't work for some people, but oh my god, it worked for me. And yeah, it makes me even more excited to read her other book. And yeah, I just love family drama. You make it horror, it's even better. I thought this was brilliant. No likable characters in this, except for maybe Dom, to be honest with you. But that's what makes them so interesting. So yeah, I could go on about this forever, but I'm excited for everybody to read this when it comes out. And then sadly, I have my first DNF of the year. And what makes this even sadder is just how pretty this book is. Honestly, I canceled my Fairy Loot subscription because I haven't been reading the books. When I do read them, I haven't really been loving them. There's a few hits there, but I just got to the point where I have a lot of pretty books. They look good on the shelf, but they're not bringing me joy other than that, and I'd rather just spend my money on books that I choose for myself. So this was my last book from Fairy Loot, and it's sad to end on a DNF, but it's a beautiful book. Probably one of the most beautiful looking books I own. I wanted to love Faebound so much. I thought that the setup was interesting. I discovered that I do like fae stories more than I thought that I did. But this one, I think I went into it the wrong expectations at first. I have also learned about myself that I'm pretty good about meeting a book where it's at. If I go into a certain expectation and it's not what I thought it would be, I can adjust pretty quickly. And in this one, it starts off with a war. There are children soldiers and everything. It's a lot darker in tone than you might initially think. And then it turns into the story of Fae. We're following these two sisters. We get both of their POVs. One is a soldier, the other is a diviner, and the soldier, through a series of events, is exiled, and the sister follows her. And I was just bored. I don't know what to tell you about it. Something about the world building wasn't connecting with me. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I'm such a character reader at heart, and it's pretty easy for me to fall in love with characters, but I just wasn't in this one. And it's really strange because normally I love sister stories, but their connection I just wasn't buying. The one character's 34 and I think the other's 27 or 28, and they read so young to me. I started this at the beginning of January before it came out because I got this Fairy Loot edition early, obviously. And then I thought, okay, maybe reading it physically isn't working for me and I should immersion read it. So I waited for the audiobook, got the audiobook. I adore Bonnie Turpin. She is a narrator who I've loved for years, but I don't know that she was the right choice for this book. Something about her narration made these characters read really young, and that could be that the writing made them read really young as well, and that combination wasn't working for me. So then when the audiobook kind of failed me, I just couldn't push through. I was buddy reading this with Becky from Bex Reads. She bailed long before I did, and then I had another friend who rated this 2 stars, and they just spoiled the entire thing for me, and I'm satisfied. I will keep this as a beautiful book and as a reminder that this is my last book from Fairy Loot, and it's such a bummer. It's so pretty. So yeah, I'm just a little bummed it didn't work for me, and that's alright. I will try something else by this author, maybe her first series that I saw a lot of people adored, but Faebound is officially my first DNF of 2024. So it's actually February 1st, and I have a few things to talk about before we can move on to February reading and all of the romances. I have 2 novellas and 2 full-length novels to talk to you about, and February was a great reading month for me. So these Meet Cute series came out from Amazon. They do those Amazon originals, which I have mixed feelings about because you can't get them in libraries, and I got them from KU and they're only available on Kindle and Audible, so that's always frustrating. And they're often from authors that I really love. So these are just short stories. They are romances, and each of these authors took a different meet cute and wrote this little story around them. And I won't read all the books in that series because I wasn't interested in all the authors, and they seem to be getting mixed reviews, so I only read 2. I read the Abby Jimenez one first because she was one of my favorites. This is The Worst Wingman Ever. And in true Abby Jimenez fashion, she made me cry in a short book. And she always does this thing where she creates really great chemistry and characters that you really adore while also breaking your heart and tackling some deeper themes. So in this one, our heroine is working as a hospice worker, and in this case she is working with her grandmother, so that is a big theme in this story, so that could be hard to read for a lot of us. And then the hero is really sweet. He is trying to help his brother by putting a Valentine's Day card on his brother's girlfriend's car, but he accidentally puts it on our heroine's car because it's a white Honda, and there are a lot of white Hondas out there. And then they start exchanging notes back and forth on her windshield, and they have this really sweet moment where they recognize one another, and I loved it. I thought they had great chemistry. I liked them both separately, and again, it's one that stays with you because it has some deeper themes. It's exploring grief, or even like anticipatory grief, which is a real thing, and I loved it. I thought it was adorable. Definitely one that I would even love to see a full-length novel of, because I just think that Abby Jimenez has such great ideas, and there was definitely more that could have been explored in that one. And then the other one I read was With Any Luck by Ashley Poston, and this one doesn't stick with me as much. It was not my absolute favorite, though I do like Ashley Poston. I wish that this one leaned more into like the light fantasy that she's known for in her romances. This one is just like that movie Good Luck Chuck, where we're following our heroine who thinks that whenever she kisses somebody, the next person that they meet is their soulmate. It's her being the best man at her best friend's wedding, and she has like a fling with the man of honor. So that's really what it is. This one is steamier than the Abby Jimenez one. It's actually less of a meet cute now that I think about it, because they met before this book ever began, so I don't know that it really works with a theme, and it's just one that's easily forgettable for me. So those are the only 2 from that series that I was really interested in trying. And then I read or reread The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. I am buddy reading the entire series with friends this year, and this was a delight. I gave it 4 stars when I initially read it a couple years ago, and it's still 4 stars, but it feels like a stronger 4 stars to me. I think I appreciate this one more upon rereading, and as I've grown as a reader. I also think that this will be hit and miss. I think if you don't relate to the humor and the humor does not work for you, it's not gonna work, because my cat is trying to get me to open the blinds. As always, she always does this, so please hold. So anyways, yeah, the humor is so British, and as a lover of British media, I feel like I get a lot of the jokes because I know a lot of the language that is used in the dry British humor. But if that's not clicking, this is not gonna click. And there are a lot of characters and their backstories to remember, but they all felt distinct to me. I thought they were all hilarious and charming, and there's just something endearing about this series. You're following these elderly people who have this club where they meet every Thursday and talk about true crime, and then a true crime case lands on their doorsteps and they're there to solve it. And I don't think you should go into this one for the mystery. Go into it for the characters, because it's more about their relationships with each other and then other people in their lives and their past and stuff. The mystery, I wasn't that intrigued by it. I actually really didn't care who done it or any of that stuff. That's not why I was there, but I heard that the rest of the series just gets better and better. So I cannot wait for that, to finally finish that series. Then I read A New Arc of How You Get the Girl by Anita Kelly. This comes out in February, and I need to get a copy the moment it comes out, because Anita Kelly is an auto-buy author for me, one of my favorite romance authors out there, and this was no exception. I think I heard that this is the last book in this universe that they have created. We're following all these different characters in the book, but somehow they're all connected, so we get cameos from all the different characters. And I did feel like it was cameo heavy in this book, but I appreciated it. Some people might not. I know that people don't always love that, and it kind of did take away some of the page time from developing the actual romance between the two people at the center of the story, because we were so focused on Julie, who is pretty much our main character, and her friendships with the characters from the first two books. So the first two books are Love and Other Disasters and Something Wild and Wonderful. So Julie is best friends with Ben from Something Wild and Wonderful, and she is the sister of London from Love and Other Disasters. So she's really the glue that connects all these books together. And now I feel like I'm rambling, but I just think it's so well done. And Julie is a high school basketball coach, and she gets this new student, Vanessa, and she finds out that Vanessa's foster mom is Elle, who was a huge WNBA star that was injured and kind of just disappeared. And through a series of events, Elle becomes the assistant coach to this basketball team. And I thought that this explored a lot of deeper themes, and that is really what Anita Kelly does. They remind me a lot of Abby Jimenez in that way, and this is really what I like in my contemporary romance, where we are here for the romance. There's great chemistry, great characters, you're cheering on this couple, but there's also something happening in their lives that are more complicated and makes them feel more real, and they're going through real life struggles, and they have character development by the end. So in this case, Julie has never been in a relationship, she's never been intimate with somebody, and she is struggling to put a label on her sexuality. And there's a lot of conversations about how you don't need to come up with a label so quickly and how you have to explore your sexuality. And where Elle firmly calls herself a lesbian and she's confident in that, Julie struggles with her sexuality, and that is something that is really explored in this book. The one thing I struggled with was the fake dating aspect of this. I wish it was more just them dipping their toes into a relationship, because they were clearly attracted to one another, and seeing what Julie's comfortable with and putting up clear boundaries and consent. But instead they do this fake dating thing where they go on pretend dates to see what Julie's okay with and how she does. And I just think that made it all too complicated, and I know that's just for the story, but that didn't quite work for me. As much as I like fake dating, just this take on it wasn't my favorite thing, but I loved it overall. It explores conversations about being a foster parent, being a foster child, the whole court system and all of that. I like the sports stuff as well. I was actually like invested in this basketball team and wanted them to do well, but it was really sweet, like holding hands, little knees touching, like the chemistry you feel with that. I just think that Anita Kelly is the best at creating tension and a good slow burn, so that was a win for me. I loved it. Hope you enjoyed this wrap up. Let me know if you've read any of these. What was the best book you read in January? Tell me all the things down below. Thank you for your support. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye for now.